Hello, I'm Brian Fox. This is my channel, I Hate Rock Music. And today I'm going to do yet another in my series about great Seattle rock bands that you probably never heard of. And this band is going to be the hardest one for me to describe and pin down as far as what kind of music they do. And that's a band called AAIIE. And so, first of all, the fact that their name is AAIIE is a unique thing and just wonderful. And it's great because they couldn't come up with a name to describe the kind of music they do. But it's spelled AAIIEE. And so if you end up looking for their stuff, that's their name. And the band at present is Johnny Vinyl on guitar, Jeff Larson on bass and vocals, Brent Petty on drums, and Greg Stump on bass. And if you watch my series videos, then you'll recognize Greg Stump on second guitar. Sorry, Greg Stump it was also in a legendary Seattle band, the Crows, that I just talked about, and he's also currently in a band called Insect Man. But the original band actually started all the way back in 1981, and at the time they had two other members, Craig Flory and David Schumott, and Dave Schumott played keyboards, and Craig Flory's a is he a trumpet player or a sax player? I can't remember. But he's a known quantity now. He's still active in Seattle, playing a lot of jazz music. And but he was in the band. Their first show was in 1981, and they played with the U-Men and the Fastbacks. And the Fastbacks, of course, were pretty fast punk rock. The U-Men were early grunge, and then you have this band IE with their hard to pin down sound. Um, I have to say that they kind of remind me of sort of a new wave punk rock, Roxy music. Sometimes some of their stuff reminds me of Eno. They have a broad range of interests. They love Sparks and everything else, and just seems like everything they like, which is a broad range of things, kind of ends up in their music. They released a single in 1990, and then they got two CDs out. So they've been around since 1981. They only have two albums out, but the first one is wonderful. It's called Meet You in Seattle, and it was released in 2012. And their second CD, Folly, was released in 2016. And oh man, I just don't know how to describe him. I love Jeff Larson's vocals. Sometimes he reminds me of the guy in the B-52s, but he just has this nice, relaxing, restrained um, vocal style, and a lot of times it borders on narration. But he's also a great lyricist, and the fact that he could write a whole album, "Meet You in Seattle," that's all based on themes about going to the Seattle World's Fair in 1962 and all those experiences. Um, just a great writer. And by the time they get to Folly, his writing is definitely on the level of brilliance. Um, and a lot of times I'm not necessarily paying a lot of attention to the lyrics, but with IE and Jeff Larson's lyrics, you really listen to them, and they're really quite excellent. But Johnny Vinyl too is a really special guitar player in the Seattle scene. He doesn't really sound like anybody else. He comes up with really wonderful, imaginative guitar parts, and that's kind of when it starts reminding me of something Eno would do or Roxy Music would do. He just comes up with these really interesting, spare, economical, but brilliant guitar parts. And then other parts where he pretty much rails out some great fat, loud chords. And so the this mixture, and then he also does great overdubs. So when he puts two guitar parts together of his own, very clever and very inventive. And he also uses effects sparingly and just really all around really imaginative guitar player. And when you hear his complete body of work, two albums, you really get a picture of just what a great guitar player he is, and the fact that he's so economical and restrained, particularly compared to what you expect from Seattle bands. It's just a wonder. And so, again, I'm not really sure how to describe him I know the album Folly from 2016 was one of my favorite albums of the last 20 years, and that's saying something because I listen to a lot of stuff, but it's just so consummate. It's funny that it took them that many years to get to that place where they made that album. They're still out doing shows, and that's another amazing thing that since 1981, they're still out there doing shows, and their music has evolved, but it still has the same identity they've always had, where it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what kind of music they're playing. I guess the closest thing I could call it is progressive punk, or it has a lot in common with new wave, but new wave, classic new wave music and the bands of the early 80s, late 70s. But they just really have their own stamp on it, and have taken it a little further. It's a lot more sophisticated. But another link that, as I always seem to talk about in some of these videos of local Seattle bands, Johnny Vinyl, of course, has been involved in a whole bunch of bands in the early, late 70s. I saw him in a band called The Radios that was around for a long time, that included a lot of Seattle rock luminaries like Kim Warnick. They were one of the first local bands I saw, and definitely one of the better ones I saw. And then he was in a band called The Missing Link for a while that included Chris Crass, who later went on to The Veins and The Living, and about 100 other bands. And then the singer from The Missing Link, John Conte, ended up in the legendary Seattle punk band The Living. And so there's a huge family tree, and Johnny Vinyl's been all over the map and has been heavily involved. He sent me a list of all the bands that he's played in Seattle, and it's really something to see. I may end up putting it as a link below. But yeah, IE, just a really special band. I don't really know of any other bands quite like them, and my personal connection doesn't cloud my ability to see what a great band they are, aside from my friendship with them. And then Jeff Larson, their bass player, I have to mention, was a bass player in my band, the Chubby Children, in 1992, when we recorded our still unreleased album. And he was a pure joy to work with and did great bass work on it. So the Seattle, if you did an entire family tree of Seattle bands, it would be insane, because there's just so many connections between so many of us. But the links are below. Check them out. Aye! I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.